evening, everyone. I'm Ashley Banfield. This is Primetime Justice. Every job has its perks, right? Benefits, freebies, access, special treatment. And you think, being the wife of the fire chief, you'd know a lot about fire safety. More than most, anyway. But Nanette Krentel, the wife of Fire Chief Steve Krentel, either didn't know or didn't care about fire safety when she died at home engulfed in flames. Or maybe Nanette had no choice, because at Nanette's funeral, her family got a call that Nanette died from a bullet wound and not because of the fire. And there is where the mystery truly begins tonight. Her family and friends just can't believe it.
Nan was wonderful, compassionate, sweet, caring. I can't imagine it. I can't fathom it. Can't put it into words.
It's really rough right now. The family's taking a hard hit. Fire department family, of course. She was part of our extended family.
There is still a lot of mystery to be left untangled here in these Louisiana woods, and it doesn't look like it's going to be easy, because a canyon seems to be widening between Nanette's family and Nanette's husband, the fire chief. I want to go to Michelle Southern Plumley. She is the Assistant News Director for the Louisiana Radio Network. Michelle, why is there a chasm between Nanette's family and Nanette's husband? You'd think they'd all want answers together.
Well, that remains a mystery, actually. Even authorities on the local level are telling us that the investigation into Kentrell's death is ongoing, and that there really is nothing that they can say at this time that wouldn't compromise what is going to be a very lengthy investigation. Really, there are more questions than answers in this case.
And one of the big questions has to do with her family. They want another autopsy. Hearing that news at her funeral, that Nanette didn't die in the fire, she actually had a bullet to her head, you'd want another autopsy. You'd want a few more opinions, at least a second opinion. And I'm not sure I understand why, Michelle, they had to actually launch court action in order to get an agreement from Nanette's husband, the fire chief, to allow that body to be looked at again.
Yeah, and that's another thing that they really are being very, very mum on. But even we in the media were told initially that the fire chief's wife had died along with her pets in this house fire. And it wasn't until later that we even found out that she had died from a gunshot wound. But another big mystery here is why the coroner has yet to officially classify, the death as, say, something like a homicide.
So that leaves the cause of death open at this point, manner of death open at this point. Was there ever a gun retrieved at the scene? Do we know anything about a gun in this story?
There's nothing about a gun in this story that I have seen. There's, not been anything released on this investigation in the form of a news release. It's mostly just what we're seeing, like you said, even in other local media about this lawsuit where the family is filing to preserve the body. They want to do their own independent autopsy. Clearly they feel that something is afoot and that they aren't receiving cooperation from this woman's husband, the fire chief.
All right, so Nanette's sister's name is Wendy, and Nanette's friend's name is Lori. And they had this to say about how a fire chief's family member doesn't know how to escape a fire. Have a listen.
Knowing my sister, I just couldn't fathom that she didn't have the resources and the gumption to get out of that fire. So I knew from the start that it was foul play. We are very eager for them to, turn over every stone that they can turn over to find out, what happened to her, and more importantly, who did this, and bring them to justice.
I want to bring in the attorney for Nanette Krentel's family. Yvette Dunwa joins me now in New Orleans. Yvette, maybe you can help me answer some questions here, but there are rumors floating around, there are reports out there that Nanette's family was getting more and more worried that the coroner was going to call this a suicide. and ultimately launched legal action, hired you to put a stop to any kind of cremation and hopefully get a second opinion. Am I right?
Well, yes and no. What happened was the family was receiving information by way of rumor and third parties. Stephen Krentel is her next of kin under the law. So that's the person that the coroner and everyone else communicates with. There was not an open line of communication between Nan's husband and her biological family. So the information wasn't flowing. The family was receiving information from all different directions, didn't know if what they were being told was true or not true. They had heard through someone that the death was going to be determined a suicide and that the remains would be released to Mr. Krentel and that he was going to immediately cremate the body. I have found out from the coroner that the investigation is still open. It's not been closed. It is not likely that there will be a determination as to whether it's a homicide, suicide, or whatever it is anytime very soon. The coroner is working cooperatively with Nanette Krentel's biological family to have a second autopsy done. They've agreed to it. They have no opposition to it.
Yeah, but all of this took litigation, as I understand. And what I was very confused about is, why on earth wouldn't Nanette's family just call Steve, call her husband, say, hey, we want a second opinion. We're all in this together, right? But as I understand it, multiple texts, emails, phone calls all went unanswered, and they grew increasingly nervous and called you, a lawyer, and said, launch the action. That doesn't sound like there's a lot of love lost between these two families.
Well, you have to understand that the coroner's hands were tied because he's
Coroner's not the part of this. It's Steve, the fire chief, and Nanette's family. They're not communicating, and they're on the same side, or they should be. Why aren't they communicating?
I don't know why they're not communicating. I can tell you.
Why did they have to hire you? Why did you have to actually file a lawsuit to make sure that Nanette wouldn't be cremated before they could get a second look, another autopsy?
I can tell you that there was not a lot of communication after the initial incident where she passed away between her family of origin, her biological family and her husband. There was not a whole lot. There was communication in the beginning, then the communication stopped. We didn't know if the numbers were not good. We didn't know if the emails weren't any good. Nobody really knew. All they knew was that they had tried to contact him and did not receive a response. There was a concern that possibly evidence could be lost. The coroner was open to having a second set of eyes look at it, but his hands were tied. So we filed a legal proceeding to make sure that that second autopsy could be done, and that in the event we can find any new information with that it would be preserved.
Can I ask this? We were able to get a hold of Steve Krentel, the fire chief in this story, and we got a statement from him, and I want to read that to our viewers. He said, the first I was made aware of the petition, and that would be the petition to get that second autopsy, was Friday afternoon. I immediately gave the coroner my permission. I have no problem with a second autopsy. The petition made it seem like I was fighting it, but that is not at all true. The petition was the first I heard about it. I am in the dark just as much as everyone else. Nothing has been shared with me as to the facts of the case. I welcome the second autopsy and would hope the family would share the results with me as soon as they receive them. That sounds like a guy who's in the same boat as your clients, Nanette's family. Do you think he's a guy in the same boat as Nanette's family?
I have no way to know. All I know is my clients were not able to talk to him, that he wasn't responsive to telephone calls or texts, and that they were interested in having a second autopsy. They received some information that he was requesting that the body be released to him for immediate cremation. They received information from someone else that he had said that the death was a suicide. And none of this...
Was there a gun? Was there any gun that we know? I mean, a suicide, think about it. If there's a house fire and you want to kill yourself and you shoot yourself and set a fire beforehand, well, the gun can't burn. If you shoot yourself, the gun's still there, and theoretically it would be pretty darn close to the body. Do we know anything about a gun potentially close to the body?
What we do not know anything officially. I can tell you that her family tells me that both she and Steve owned handguns, so handguns would have been present on the premises. Whether they were found near the body or not, we don't know. We believe that handguns were found, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because we all know who's been connected to the case, including her family members, that she and her husband both owned handguns. So,
and we want to be really clear that the fire chief in this story, Steve Krentel, is not a suspect. He's not been charged. Well, he's not a suspect that we know of, that's for sure. The police aren't saying so. He has not been charged in this story. For all we know, he could be just as much a victim as Nanette's, other side of the family. I want to bring in Robert Rowe real quickly, if I can. He's a fire investigator, and he's the president of Pyrocop Incorporated. So, Robert, look, it doesn't take, a rocket scientist to put together a crime scene. If somebody commits suicide with a gun, it will be there regardless of any kind of fire, and fire's your expertise. So I'm not wrong, right?
No, you're not wrong. I mean, I've investigated fires where suicide was involved, and we did retrieve a weapon near the body. So yes, the evidence is preserved. It's just a matter of searching through the debris and making sure that you complete a thorough investigation.
And a thorough investigation is not always shared immediately, and I understand that as well, Robert. But when you have that kind of discovery, isn't that the kind of investigative evidence you would share with family members sooner rather than later, so there just isn't this kind of angst that the Krentel family seems to be going through right now?
Well, that's a tough question, because there are certain things that, until your investigation is complete, that you don't really want to share right away, because new information may come up that may prove you to be incorrect in your outcome. So, it's a very sensitive topic, and you have to be able to make sure that you go through your scene thoroughly, make sure you gather all of the evidence before you actually come to a conclusion. That's a very important aspect of fire investigation.
And we are often very much on the outside of that, sphere of influence when it comes to what all the facts are as a complete picture. Michelle Southern Plumley, as part of the folks collecting the information in the media, do we know anything, Michelle, about the story of gasoline? This is something the family has heard through third references, that there was gasoline where the body was found. Do we know anything more about that, whether that's confirmed or whether that is just rumor?
As far as I'm concerned, as a news reporter in Louisiana, that is just rumor. And, we are obviously friends with all of our contacts at the State Fire Marshal's office. And when they tell us, we can't tell you anything right now, we have to hang up the phone. And that is the answer that we have been given throughout the duration of this investigation.
Well, we remain as confused as ever, and I think there's still a lot more questions than answers in this story. We're going to continue to look through it. Michelle, Yvette, and Robert, thank you so much. A 16-year-old girl disappeared